This is Bumper to Bumper, the car show. Drive in anxious and cruise out confident. With the best automotive information for your vehicle. And now your hosts, Matt Allen and Dave Riccio.
Bumper Radio. I am Dave Riccio, here along with Matt Allen, and we are here to help you with your car every Saturday from 11 to noon. At Bumper to Bumper Radio, we're helping you, the motoring public, have a better overall car experience. If you've got car questions, we've got car answers, or at least we think. So we encourage you to give us a call at 602-277-5827, 602-277-KTAR. Today on the Bumper to Bumper Roadmap, a little bit of fact or fiction. We're taking your text and phone calls, and I found one of Matt's old bosses. Uh-oh. And he happens to be my radiator supplier, and I thought, man, what a great conversation, because radiators aren't anything like they used to be. You know, they used to have these tanks on them. You take them in and get them rotted and repaired and fixed, and they'd stick it back in there. That doesn't even happen anymore.
It doesn't. And if you've got a car, you've got a radiator. So it's something. Summertime is really the time of year where we see all the radiator repairs in the shop. We're broken down. Usually those are people are getting towed in and they have these problems.
The dramatic repairs.
And we still see radiator issues, of course, through the wintertime. I used to live in Virginia, back east, Washington, D.C. area, and we would experience radiator failures there with the extreme cold and freezing and such if people didn't have the have their coolant level freeze protection properly. And but here we still see them through the wintertime, and we're always watching. There's signs when you have a radiator problem. And for most people, the average consumer and driver on the road is not going to know these things. And we can't even really explain them, I think. That's what I tell people.
Well, you know what? I don't want to know what you got to know about radiators. We've got Terry Stewart from 1-800-RADIATOR with us.
And nice shut down there, huh, Dave?
And this guy knows more about radiators than Matt could ever think he knows about radiators. And this is actually Matt's old boss. Matt worked for him back in 1993. Hey, Terry, it's good to have you.
It's great to be here, guys.
What is the biggest thing that you think people need to know about the radiators?
Maintenance. A radiator, guys, is just, a good analogy is a beer can. All it is, it's there to hold the fluid, cool the fluid, and that's it. But if you don't maintain the fluid, you're going to have problems.
So you don't want your beer to go stale. Flat beer's not beer's not good. So maintenance, the main maintenance item, is that just keeping fresh coolant in it, or is that you mentioned coolant level?
Fresh coolant. A lot of times what happens is people will have small leaks, or they won't maintain their coolant, and the coolant level will drop. With our new radiators that we have today that are the aluminum cores with the plastic tanks, when that radiator coolant drops, it creates a level above the coolant that is really turns into steam, and steam starts to crystallize those plastic tanks, and before you know it, you're going to see a crack, and now you have a major repair or a semi-major repair and have to get that radiator replaced when all you had to do is keep that level at a proper level.
And it's never going to go out at a convenient time.
Never.
Well, and I think when people think of maintenance, you don't really I guess in the old days, everybody would come in once a year. I need my radiator flushed. And so we're not necessarily saying take care of the radiator. It will be taken care of, but you've got to maintain the cooling system, which is part of the overall maintenance of the car. We want to make sure the coolant is clean. We've got to make sure it's full, make sure it's changed on a regular basis. And by doing that, that maintains your radiator. That's what comes along with it. And it's not just maintenance of the radiator. It's the whole system. Cooling systems now, they want to say the coolant will last till 100,000 miles. Terry, what's your thoughts on that? We all have an opinion. What's yours? And then we'll talk
My
about
opinion is nothing can take the place of regular maintenance. And 100,000 miles, that you have to remember is an overall nationwide average. And where do we live? Probably one of the worst environments for heat exchange there is in the country. Mm-hmm. And to say that we can go 100,000 miles, I think we're kind of rolling the dice as far as our maintenance goes. And I believe that you should probably have the coolant changed no longer than a 5-year.
Mm-hmm. I would agree, and that's kind of what we tend to do at our shop is that 50,000 mile mark. We're starting to look at it. Used to be 30. Well, I think it used to be way before I even got in the business, it was every year.
Yeah, 12,000 miles.
Yeah. And then it was kind of the 30,000 mile. It shifted there in the 80s and 90s, but before 30,000 miles now, I'm not really looking at it. 50,000, we're taking a hard look and starting to really monitor it then. And you're right, just getting that coolant out of there, it can turn acidic and start eating up aluminum and other components in the system. We see water pump impellers that rot away from bad coolant. And then what happens? The car starts getting hot, building pressure, and what's that beer can or that radiator doing? It's bulging at the seams,
That's right.
And you take a minor maintenance issue, or if you ignore a minor problem, bam, you've got a.
Beer is a great topic, but when we were talking earlier, Terry, we were talking about how long a radiator should last. And I think the point, somebody may keep a car 150,000 miles if that radiator is maintained. And I know some guys, they like to argue about the old, copper and, brass. Those were the best. They don't make them like that anymore. They just use this cheap plastic. But you're saying that cheap plastic radiator, if maintained, actually lasts longer.
That's exactly right, Dave, because as the cars got newer, they started running at a hotter rate. The engines are made to run hotter. It's more efficient for them, but it puts a bigger strain on the cooling system. They went to aluminum because, for a number of reasons. One, the actual base metal is a cheaper cost product to produce. But two is to make sure that it would dissipate the heat for that vehicle that you needed to dissipate. And if they maintain the system, there's no reason why you can't go 150,000 miles on a plastic aluminum radiator. The old copper brass radiators, they were a soldered-on brass tank on a copper core. There was no give and take. And if you think of a radiator, when they test these and they're producing them, they do what they call cycle test. A cycle test is they heat up the radiator, they cool off the radiator. They heat it up, they cool it off. When they heat it up, that radiator actually expands kind of like a balloon. When they cool it off, it contracts. There's that expansion and contraction. What happens is, in the copper brass radiator, there was no give and take. It was a solid unit. In the plastic aluminum radiator, you have a fiberglass composite tank that is crimped on an aluminum core with a rubber gasket between the two, which allows some give and take, so they actually last longer as long as they're maintained.
I think a lot of people, some of the old school would argue with that, but I believe it's to be true. Now, did we talk about the low level in the radiator, that being an issue?
We did. It creates a steam pocket. And the other thing is the radiator cap. The radiator cap is designed to hold pressure on. The higher the pressure, or higher the pressure, the lower the boiling point. So if you have what was the stat on that, Terry?
For every pound of pressure that you lose in a cooling system, you lose 10 degrees of cooling efficiency. So if you've got a 16-pound cap and it's only holding 12 pounds of pressure, you've lost 40 degrees of cooling capability in that system.
And as well, and I don't know the number on this one, you've also decreased the boiling point. You've brought it closer back down to that 212 mark, and that's where you get the when people talk about overheating, it's because you've lost the pressure, so now everything boils over, and you see the steam coming out from underneath the hood. And
well, one of the things I like to see people do is we can look at these radiators, and Terry, you've said it, and Matt, you said it. You can actually see the tank starting to change color, right?
That's right.
As it's getting weak and fatigued and whatnot. You can prevent the overheat, because the overheat is what's going to ruin your car. Mm-hmm. You're going down the freeway, the car overheats. By the time you get pulled over, you've already warped the head, and now you're talking about a major repair on a vehicle that's got 150,000 miles on it. Do I invest that money? Don't I invest that money? Well, if your car's 10 years old and it's got 150,000 miles on it, you should be ready to buy a radiator. It doesn't have to happen in an emergency situation.
That's absolutely right.
You can kind of plan around it. There's times when we're doing a timing belt on a car. And I'll use a Toyota for an example, like a 4Runner, because that's one I just know off the top of my head. We take the radiator out when we do the timing belt because it just makes it easier. We're not going to worry about damaging it. There's more room. And oftentimes we'll talk to people and say, you're 190,000 miles, second time around on this timing belt. You're clearly going to keep this car a long time. We've already got the radiator out, it's only going to cost you the part to put a new one in. So sometimes that's another thing to ask the shop. How's it looking? Is there anything with my radiator while you're doing these other repairs?
Well, Matt and I and Terry are here to help you with your car. So if you got any questions, 602-277-5827, 602-277-KTAR. You can also text us at 411-923 if you're the shy type. You're listening to Matt and Dave, your KTAR car guys on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, this is Greg LaFonsi of Automotive Diagnostic Specialties. Long name, right? But we have a short, simple goal. Customer satisfaction is our number one priority, and everything else takes care of itself. Bumper to Bumper Radio approved. ADS is a family-owned and operated state-of-the-art repair facility that has an expert staff that for the second straight year has earned the coveted AAA Top Shop Award as one of the best shops in the nation. Just east of I-10 on Chandler Boulevard. Find us at automotivediagnosticspecialties.com.
I'll never forget
that moment.
As long as I live.
My
first call up ever as a member of the National Guard.
When we got to the armory, they briefed us on the wildfires. They were getting dangerously close to homes.
Helicopters were going out to drop water on the fires.
Guys in the unit were preparing for firefighting with local fire crews.
At that moment, I got my first taste of just how important the Guard is to my community.
See how the Guard can be an important part of your life at NationalGuard.com.
Sponsored by the Arizona National Guard. Aired by the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
World class and in your own backyard. If you live or work in downtown Phoenix, Matt Allen's Virginia Auto Service is just around the corner at 7th Street in Virginia. And for over 19 years, they've been recognized as one of the best auto repair shops in the country. Voted Best Auto Repair by AZ Central, A+ rated by the BBB, 2-year 24,000-mile warranty, and complimentary transportation to and from your home or office. Virginia Auto. They're serious about service. See for yourself. VirginiaAutoservice.com. Fix it or forget it. This is the show that'll help you decide what to do with your car. Bumper to Bumper Radio. KTAR News on 92.3 FM.
Well, welcome back to Bumper Radio. I am Dave Riccio, here along with Matt Allen, and we've got Tony Stewart.
Tony Stewart, the NASCAR driver.
Terry Stewart. See, look at that. From 1-800-RADIATOR in. We're talking about radiators today. We can talk about anything on your car that you want to talk about at 602-277-5827, 602-277-KTAR. Also, you can text us at 411-923.
Terry, earlier you were talking about the manufacturers when they're doing quality control tests on radiators or engineering tests. Pressure cycles are going to pressurize, heat them, heat cycle, heat them, cool them, heat them, cool them. You mentioned 10,000. Was that just a number that was in your head just to make up a number, or was that a standard?
When they actually engineer these, that is typically the standard to produce a similarity between 10 years on the road to be able to wind up getting an idea of how well that radiator is going to perform.
Okay, so I'm going to do some quick math, and I'm not real good at it, and I'm better at whole numbers than odds and whatnot. But if you drive your car to work every day and you drive it home, each trip is a heat cycle.
That's correct.
So you've got how many in a day? 2?
Mm-hmm.
2. So if you do that, you're going to have almost 700 heat cycles if all you do is use your car to go back and forth to work twice a day, or in the morning.
Not including the grocery store and to the gym and to all those other places.
Yeah, and now it may not be a complete heat cycle all the way hot to cold, but you think about that. It's 700, maybe it's 1,000 a year. So 10,000. And before when did the radiators, if I remember right, we started seeing some plastic tanks in the late 80s, maybe early 90s. In our kind of general rule of thumb, we would say if it's less than 10 years old or 100,000 miles and it has a leak or something, we'll fix it. If it's more than that, it's not worth fixing. We'll just replace it because the fixed one may not last as long. And now nobody fixes them.
That's
right?
correct.
Maybe your big trucks and dump trucks and over-the-road type of material or things, and your hot rods and still your 67 Mustang or early cars, they fix them.
That's right. It became a scale of economics because the aluminum radiators became less in price and less cost to produce them, obviously the price came down. Well, labor didn't come down. Everybody's making more money today than they did 10 years ago, hopefully.
I wish.
And, and so because of that, the scales of economics, it just doesn't pay to repair something when you can replace it.
And plus all the environmental hazards with the lead and, I mean, all that. I wouldn't want to be a radiator repair guy today.
That's why we got out of the repair business.
Well, we got some people on the phone that we want to help out. I've got a 93 Civic. Let's see. That's line 1 there, Matt.
Yeah, I know, but it looks like somebody was already on that line because it's locked up. So we're going to go with Rick, who's got a 1994 Isuzu pickup. Rick, what can we help you with today? And that's not working either. We're going to see what's going on here. We're going to try one more here. We're going to give, I don't know what's going on here. How about Al? Alan Chandler has a semi-truck. I don't know about those, but with any luck, we won't have to talk to him because the phone's not working.
How's it going, Al? Are you there?
Nope.
Hey, Al? Nope. Okay.
Nope, we got no phones today. So, well, that's all right. So radiators, when you're going to do the radiator, you come into my shop, and I mean, we talked about things that we know. It's hard to describe. I've gone out to a car so many times that people say, oh, I have a rattle or I have something totally unrelated to a radiator. And I'll go out and I'm just looking for the hood latch, and automatically I'm smelling something. I'm like, you've got a leaking radiator. There's a cooling system leak somewhere. They're like, how do you know? You can just smell it. So I mean,
you can't walk through a parking lot anymore, and that's, it's over there. It's over there. It's interesting. Terry was saying, he's part of a 1-800 radiator. It's basically it's franchise, and he's in one of the hottest markets as far as you guys volume-wise. Arizona is like the central of the universe when it comes to radiators.
Oh, that's correct. I mean, actually, just because of where we're at, we run about a 1 to 1.5% higher defect rate on our product than some of the rest of the country, and that's because of the climate we're in. Those cycle counts, those cycle expansions and contractions of starting and stopping your car are a lot more severe in our market than they are in most markets in the country.
The radiator capital. Phoenix is a capital for a lot of things. So
I think maybe we have a caller on the line, Dave.
93 Honda Civic. How can we help you today?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
You bet.
Oh, excellent. Listen, my 93 Civic is my wife's car. It doesn't get driven hardly at all. It's got 22,000 actual miles on it. And I start it once a month and I put it on a trickle charger, but now the starter is just whirling. It's turning over very fast, but it's not engaging the starter. So, or it's not engaging the car. Any ideas?
Well, yeah, on that there's a Bendix or a solenoid. There's two parts to the starter motor working. First, it's got to rotate the gear and be able to engage with the flywheel to have enough power to spin the engine over. But also, there's the Bendix that pushes that rotating gear out to mate up with the flywheel. So it sounds like that electrical portion of the starter just isn't working. The thing is torquing and spinning like it's supposed to. It's just not being pushed out that extra inch it needs to engage with the flywheel. I mean, you may be able to get it started to avoid a tow bill. You might be able to crank it, maybe whack it with a wrench or a hammer or something like that to get it to go, but it probably just needs a starter.
22,000 miles on a 20-something, 30-something-year-old car. I bet you the coolant should be changing there because it's probably turned to acid.
Well, yeah, I mean, a car, and that's got the old, your basic green ethylene glycol coolant in it. That stuff will just rot sitting there.
Yeah, there's a lot of aluminum parts on that vehicle, and anytime you have acid and aluminum, it's highly susceptible to corrosion.
Yeah, and then not only that, but then you've got the cast iron block and aluminum head, so now you've got different metals, and that causes all kinds of havoc in cooling systems. So, yeah, some time. He mentioned something else, that he starts the car once a month. And I'll tell you, that's good to do, but don't just start it up and let it run for 30 seconds. You've got it. You talk about heat cycles. You've got to get that warmed up, because if not, it runs a little bit richer when it's cold. And if you don't heat through, you're going to maybe foul the plugs, get the catalytic converter contaminated. It makes the oil, a lot of condensation. It doesn't burn off get the thing hot and boil all the moisture and water out of the oil. So when you're doing that, get that thing, drive it 2 or 3 miles. Don't just start it.
For sure. So the takeaway for for our listeners on the radiator systems. It's not just the radiators that go bad. We've got thermostat issues. That's a big one.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned impellers coming off on the water pump coming apart. That's a problem. There's also cooling fans. I mean, how common do you see cooling fan issues in your shop, Matt?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, well, yeah. And then usually what we see is the fan has gone bad and the radiator's blown up because of the fan. And there's always what happened and what caused it to happen. We've got to look at those. And, and I started to go there before, and I don't remember if I did or not. But when you're putting in the radiator, that's the time to do the upper and lower radiator hose.
Oh, absolutely.
They're both half off.
Yeah, yeah. And definitely don't forget that cap. That is such a small costed item that can cause huge problems.
What do you think about coolant? Do you like the original equipment coolant, the factory, or do you like the chameleon one-size-fits-all, or what's your thought?
I prefer going with what the OE recommended, not necessarily what the OE recommended as far as maintenance levels, though.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The coolant, I don't want the one-size-fits-all. I want the right one that came in the car.
You got to have 32 flavors of everything. Coolant,
That's what you have, yeah.
Transmission fluid. So when we come back, we're taking your calls at 602-277-5827. Looks like we got the phones working. We're going to have Rick, Al, Chad, and Jerry. And we're also taking texts at 411-923. You're listening to Matt and Dave, your KTAR car guys, here on the Bumper to Bumper radio show. We'll be right back.
Now they got the phones.
Informed and on time with Arizona's breaking news and traffic. KTAR News on 92.3 FM and KTAR.com. Your news now.
KTAR News Time is 11:30. I'm Bob Trent. A final vote is expected Monday on a $1.1 trillion catch-all spending bill after two Republican senators' demands prompted a delay. Ted Cruz of Texas and Mike Lee of Utah demanded a vote yesterday on a proposal to cut funds that might allow the Obama administration to implement his immigration policy. Residents, police, and soldiers in a central Indonesian village are digging through debris with anything available, including their bare hands, after a deadly mudslide triggered by torrential rains. Officials say at least 18 people died and 90 are missing. About 105 houses were swept away. And check the calendar, it's 12/13/14. Lottery players have taken notice, and so have people who want to get married. One Las Vegas wedding chapel has 120 couples booked for ceremonies today. There won't be another sequential calendar date for 20 years when January 2nd, 2034 arrives. Now, let's get a check on traffic and weather. At the Larry H. Miller Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Traffic Center, here's Mike Daniels.
Well, thanks, Bob. Still working that wreck involving a rollover semi that's blocking the transition ramp from the southbound 202 Santan Freeway to the westbound 60. This one's going to last a while. And we have the accident in Glendale at Cactus Road, both directions east and westbound at 59th Avenue. And we have a wreck in 17 southbound approaching Bethany Home Road to watch out for. And we got a wreck involving a pedestrian at Camelback and 35th. And we have that accident involving a bicycle at 75th Avenue and Indian School Road. I'm Mike Daniels, KTAR News.
Thanks, Mike. KTAR weather for the Valley today. Rain in the morning. It'll be clearing up by this afternoon. Lows in the low 60s. Tonight, clearing skies. Lows around 40 degrees. Right now in Surprise, it's 61. For your complete weather forecast, visit the Howard Air Weather Center at KTAR.com. I'm Bob Trent, KTAR News.
This is Bumper to Bumper Radio. KTAR News on 92.3 FM.
Welcome back to Bumper Radio. I am Matt Allen. He is Dave Riccio, and we're joined by Terry Stewart, not Tony Stewart, from Hawks Radiator, 1-800 Radiator, and he is I would say you're probably supply most all the, a good portion of the automotive repair shops and body shops in town. You're the radiator guy.
That's true.
You're like TS, the king of radiator, instead of JJ, the king of beepers, right? Something like that. So we are talking about radiators today. We're talking about anything you want to talk about on your car. If you have a question, anything we can help you with, you're just not sure, give us a call at 602-277-5827. It's 602-277-KTAR. And at Bumper to Bumper Radio, we have bumpertobumperradio.com, and there's lots of shops there if you're looking for a shop. And one of the shops you'll find there is our gracious host, Dave Riccio's Tri-City Transmission. Just received a national award, I think it came out, hit the presses yesterday, Dave, was voted by Motor Age Magazine, which is an industry magazine. Does a nationwide survey and polling and testing, sampling of shops. And they came up to the conclusion that Dave is one of the top 10 in the United States. So congratulations, Dave, and your team at Tri-City Transmission.
Thank you, Matt. I paid him to say that, by the way.
Clearly not enough.
We got to get to the phones. We've got, looks like Rick with a 94 Isuzu pickup. Hey, Rick, you're on Bumper to Bumper Radio. How can we help you today?
Okay, I appreciate the call, or taking my call, but I have a 94, Isuzu pickup, 4-cylinder, and it was running really good, and then all of a sudden it started doing a knocking thing. And I had a S10 before, probably about the same year, 94, and it was an EGR valve. And will a bad EGR valve make it sound like it's got a knock?
Well, when you talk about knock, I first started to think of a rod knock or a lower engine knock, 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 knock that you might hear on idle even, or just revving the motor. EGR valve would be more of a pinging noise, like a rattling on acceleration. Help me out with that knock description again.
Well, basically, I think it's like the second one that you mentioned. But when I put better gas in it, at least when it first started, and I would use better gas, it would kind of go away.
Okay, okay. So what we are talking about is a pinging issue, and you're going to have, and this goes to all cars. This isn't just your '94 Isuzu, which I think is I'm thinking in my head it's that Ombre that is similar to an S10. And you're going to get high cylinder temperature. In the combustion chamber, high cylinder temperature causes that detonation. And what it is the high temperature ignites the fuel before the spark plug, so you get that noise. And then when you get that noise, you also get higher emissions. You get higher operating temperature in the cylinder, a running hot car, possibly. And so the EGR valve, exhaust gas recirculation, it helps reduce the emissions. And when that opens, it helps cool the cylinder temperature.
Now, the high-octane fuel burns slower, so that could kind of offset some of that.
Yeah, but you're just wasting money on fuel that you don't need. You're really masking the underlying problem. So we've got so what we now have to back up and say, why do we have high cylinder temperature? Is the EGR valve working? Yes or no? If it's not, it's definitely can contribute to that. A lot of cars now don't have an EGR valve. So if it doesn't have an EGR valve, then we have to wonder, do we have carbon buildup in the engine? When we have a radiator going bad on a car that's running hot, it's knocking and pinging, causing that pinging noise. So maybe there's not anything wrong with the engine or the combustion chamber. We have a cooling system problem potentially, or we just have a lot of carbon buildup. So we need to clean the engine to get, use fuel injection cleaning or engine decarboning. So you really just need, it sounds like it's a similar problem with your S10 that you had before, and if it's doing the same type of thing, you want to be looking at that EGR valve. There's some fairly simple tests, a vacuum test, and to see if it's working. You can apply vacuum to it with the engine running and see if it will stall out the engine. Those are some of the simple tests. And if you're handy with a car, you can do that. Chilton manual and some tools. That's not too bad of a repair if you kind of know what you're doing. Otherwise, just needs to go to a shop and a fairly simple diagnosis.
Well, thanks for the call, Rick. 602-277-5827, 602-277 KTAR. I got a couple texts here that are radiator related, so I want to talk to. One is I have a 1961 Ford F1 100 292 motor. Where is the best place to get a radiator for it to have the one I have rebuilt? I want to keep it all original as possible. Is there still shops doing that kind of work?
There are a few shops in the valley still doing that kind of work. Fortunately, we're in such a hot climate, and we do have a lot of car enthusiasts in this valley that do require that. So there are a few shops doing that now that if you want to keep it original, you're not going to be able to replace it. You're going to need to do what's called a recore. And what they'll do is they'll remove the tanks, the original tanks, off of the radiator, replace everything in between those original tanks, put the tanks back on, and you're basically getting a new unit, and it still looks like the original, and that sounds like what you're looking for.
Yeah, so they're reusing the tanks on the side, and then we'll shoot him back a text with maybe a place or two that he might be able to make a phone call and find out.
And another one I got here, this guy writes in, I do a new radiator cap every year, but I don't buy a cheap piece of, and then he wrote something else I can't say on the radio, but buy a good radiator cap, and I think that's actually a good point because there are some really crummy caps. Your radiator's only as good as your cap.
Well, and on the other note, too, if you have a late model car, there's absolutely no reason to open that cooling system. The reserve reservoirs are typically clear, and the coolant is green or blue or some orange, some color, and you can see it. It really is no need to open them. The last thing you want to do is be letting the outside oxygen into the system. Just leave it sealed as long as possible, too.
Well, we are going to go with Chad in Tucson on a 2000 Chevy pickup. Hey, Chad, you're on Bumper to Bumper Radio. How can we help you?
Hey there, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Here's the deal. So my truck, it's my work truck. Put a lot of miles on it. I mean, I'm all a contractor. I'm all over the place. Every day I'm somewhere new. I'm Sierra Vista today. I was in San Carlos yesterday. I was in Flag last week. So I'm all over the place with this truck, and it's a great little work truck. Pushing about 200,000 miles, so we're getting up there. I appreciate the radiator talk today. You know, that's good stuff. But my maintenance records on my radiator is good, and everything else is good. But when I bought this truck, the only thing that wasn't listed in the maintenance records was the fuel pump. So what I've got going on now, and my problem, the reason for my call is, I noticed, like a month ago or so, I was standing there loading my truck up. I had the truck running, so I was listening to the radio, and I started smelling gasoline. So I looked under there, and from where my fuel pump is, on the top of the fuel tank, and there's gasoline leaking from there.
Right.
So now I go around town and I get under there and I check it every day. I'm looking at it to see what's going on. And some days it's not leaking, and some other days it is. But I really notice it after it's been idling for 5 minutes or more. I notice it, and then I drive away, and I can see that it's starting to considerably leak.
Well, depending on what you've got, the situation with the bed and the camper shell or whatever, maybe you've got a fifth wheel hitch on there for hauling your tractor around. I'm not sure, but really what we need to do is get access to the top of the fuel tank. And the difference when you see it and don't see it might be the rise in the fuel level, by filling the tank and using some up. The idling doesn't really seem to make me think too much, except for that it is a plastic hanger where that fuel pump hangs down into the tank, and that could have a fracture or a crack in that plastic housing, maybe around the return line or something like that. But it's either get the tank down and find out what's happening, or a lot of times instead of taking the tank down, if there's not a bunch of stuff in the bed or a camper shell or a fifth wheel, it's easier to lift the bed off the truck and you can actually see it functioning. Make sure if you're going to do that yourself, you clean, use your yard blower or your compressed air and get it all cleaned off so you don't get that dirt back in the system. And even if it's not the fuel pump, at 200,000 miles, if I had the tank down and the bed off, I'm throwing a pump in it because it's going to go bad.
Hey, Chad, thanks for the call. We've got Al, Jerry, Glenn, and Bill, and we're going to go with Al because he's our first semi phone call we've ever had on this show, so this is a big deal. Hey, Al, how can we help you with your semi today?
Well, this product might work on anything that has a radiator. I've read several reviews, and it sounds like a miracle product. It's the manufacturer. The only thing I've read is from a manufacturer called Evans. It's waterless coolant.
Waterless coolant. Terry?
Yeah,
you got me.
They highly recommend. I mean, everything I've read was very, very positive. I've read some independent reviews from big diesel performance shops, and this has no silicons in it, which supposedly is supposed to be much better for the engine, and the boiling point is like through the roof, where you basically blow the motor up before you ever get this stuff hot enough to. So I just was wondering if you guys had ever heard of anything like that, and if you had an opinion.
I don't, because I've never heard of it. My opinion would be if it's a miracle, it doesn't work, probably. But maybe that's an over-the-road truck thing. I'm not sure. We might take a look at it. I know I did some work on my Excursion diesel, and a lot of people were telling me don't put the Ford factory coolant back in it because it's got the silicates. You want to go with the Caterpillar coolant because it doesn't have whatever makes something happen.
Polonium carbide.
Yeah. The polonium carbide. That's what it was. So I mean, I'm going to check into it, but I've never heard of it. I'm just a believer in nothing. There's no silver bullets. Just put in the OE coolant, the original equipment.
It's time for Fact or Fiction. Let me remember what the fact or fiction is for today. I think it was something along the lines of, if I've got a little bit of a leak, I can get some radiator stop leak, and I can take off the radiator cap and pour it in and run that baby around the block, and it is fixed for good. Radiator stop leak, fact or fiction, is good for my car.
You want me to answer that one, Dave?
Actually, no. I'm going to go with Terry over here. Fact or fiction, Terry, a stop leak is good for my car.
Well, first of all, let's take a look at why they created stop leak. Stop leak was to stop your radiator from leaking, which in essence means it's going to plug up a hole. Well, your radiator is made of tiny little tubes, and it does not know whether the hole is getting plugged up or those tiny little tubes. Now, if it is a small leak, there's a good chance it'll take care of that leak, but what it also will do, it'll also plug up your radiator. And if your radiator gets plugged up, you're going to have a problem because now the fluid can't flow through those tubes and allow it to cool.
That is so much more an effective answer than I would have asked Matt. Matt would answer that question.
I still haven't heard fact or fiction, so we're going to take a big fat fiction out of that one, right?
A big fat fiction. If you're stranded, you've got you're miles and miles from a repair shop, and you just want to get there, by all means, if that's your only option, then go ahead and do it. But I highly recommend when you get to that repair shop, you have the system completely cleaned out, flushed out, and replaced with coolant.
Yeah, and you know what? It's important to tell the shop, hey, I put 4 times more stop leak in there than the instructions said, because after all, a little is good, so a lot's better.
More must be better.
We've got to know that's in there. A lot of times we can see it. It's been in there, but we need to know about it. We need to get that cleaned out, because that could also trick us to go down a different route of diagnosing. It's going to throw a false positive, if you will, lead us
That's
somewhere
right.
that
help your shop help you.
Yeah, exactly.
When we come back, we've got Glenn, Bill, Mike, and Jerry. You listen to Matt and Dave, your KTAR car guys, on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
World class and in your own backyard. If you live or work in downtown Phoenix, Matt Allen's Virginia Auto Service is just around the corner at 7th Street in Virginia. And for over 19 years, they've been recognized as one of the best auto repair shops in the country. Voted Best Auto Repair by AZ Central, A+ rated by the BBB, 2-year 24,000-mile warranty, and complimentary transportation to and from your home or office. Virginia Auto. They're serious about service. See for yourself. VirginiaAutoservice.com.
I'm a paramedic, and it may sound silly, but a lot of people are afraid to call me when they're experiencing chest pain, or to call 911 if they're with someone experiencing chest pain. You know why? Because they think it would be embarrassing if it were a false alarm. Instead, people risk permanent damage or death because they're afraid they might get a lecture. That's ridiculous. So if you have an uncomfortable pressure, fullness, squeezing, or pain in the center of the chest that lasts more than a few minutes, call me. If you have a pain that spreads to the shoulders, neck, or arms, call me. If you have any discomfort in your chest with lightheadedness, fainting, sweating, nausea, or shortness of breath, call me. If you have any of these symptoms or are with someone who does, dial 911 right away. And if it is a false alarm, I'm not going to give you a lecture. I'll be happy to see you. I would much rather treat someone who isn't having a heart attack than to try to save someone who is. To learn more about heart attack warning signs, call the American Heart Association at 1-800-AHA-USA1 or visit us on the web at americanheart.org.
Hi, this is Greg LaFonsi of Automotive Diagnostic Specialties. Long name, right? But we have a short, simple goal. Customer satisfaction is our #1 priority, and everything else takes care of itself. Bumper to Bumper Radio approved. ADS is a family-owned and operated state-of-the-art repair facility that has an expert staff that for the 2nd straight year has earned the coveted AAA Top Shop Award as one of the best shops in the nation. Just east of I-10 on Chandler Boulevard. Find us at automotivediagnosticspecialties.com.
Who can you trust here in the Valley to repair your ride? This is Bumper to Bumper Radio. KTAR News on 92.3 FM.
Welcome back to Bumper Radio. I'm Dave Riccio, here along with Matt Allen, and we've got Terry Stewart. Earlier I confused him with Tony Stewart. They look similar.
I trade checkbooks with him.
And we are taking your phone calls. We've got a board full of calls, so we are going to go with, looks like, I'm thinking Jerry in Mesa on an 02 Buick Century, I think. How can we help you today, Jerry?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good. I have a 2002 Buick Century, and when you're sitting at idle for a little time, like sitting in line to get your smog test, it's the heater, the radiator indicator shows that it's heating up. And I believe it may be the fan isn't turning on, but I don't know that. Once you start going again, the needle goes back to normal.
Yeah, I mean that's a classic sign of a fan that's not coming on. That's going to be that's an electronic cooling fan. So I mean, a way that I might test that in my shop, I'm going to go out, and if the fans aren't running, I'm just going to go turn the air conditioner on, because when the engagement of the air conditioner, both of those fans should be running, and that's at least just going to tell me, do the fans work, do the circuits work, wiring and whatnot. And if they both come on, great, we know they work. Now we're going to be looking at a coolant temperature sensor or relay or something that should be controlling those fans. If we turn the AC on and they don't work at all, now we're starting to question the whole circuit. So that would be something simple that you couldn't even have to lift the hood to do that. You could do that at home just by listening. But it sounds like you have a fan problem. Fairly simple diagnosis for any shop.
For any shop. And it could be, I think, Terry, I can read his thoughts. He's saying it could be a little bit low on coolant. Is that what you're saying in your mind?
It could be a little low on coolant. One thing I might add to that is there are, and I'm not sure on that particular vehicle, but a lot of times now the fans are dual speed.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we've seen instances where the high speed doesn't work, but the low speed does, and you may not be getting enough air across that cooling system to do its job.
Yeah, and we check. I mean, I talk about, sometimes we go for the hard stuff first. I mean, we're just talking about it. You could have picked up a bag on the freeway. I mean, you suck something up in the car on the just going down the road, and now you've got 25% restriction of airflow. Just could be a number of different things,
But if we were just going to guess, a WAG.
That's what I call it.
Cooling fan related. Well, thanks for the call, Jerry. We're going to go with Glenn in Peoria on a 1941 Willys. Have you had any of those in your shop lately, Matt?
Two
of them. Okay. How can we help you today, Glenn?
Well, I've got, as I said, a 1941 Willys, and I've had the body off for probably 3 months so that I could get the transfer case and transmission repaired. I'm now getting sleepless nights wondering if letting the engine sit there for 3 months has been bad for it. Should I be hand turning it every week or so, or am I okay?
My first thought is I wouldn't be terribly worried about it, just having it sit. I mean, it's a 41. It probably doesn't. You know what though? Glenn, what engine is in that? It's
the F-head, the 134 engine.
Okay, so it's not a conversion or anything. So I don't think so. I don't think there's anything's happening. I mean, if you wanted to be ultra proactive, you could maybe put just a teeny bit of Marvel's Mystery Oil in the cylinders. I mean, just an ounce, and maybe turn it over and leave it. But I'd question even doing that.
But if it hadn't started in a long time, before you do go fire it up, you might want to prime the oil pump and get some oil going through it. I mean, if it's been sitting a long time, I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be, maybe.
It's hard to say. I mean, that's...
He gave me that. I disagree with you, Dave. I understand.
Not my department. I don't know. One thing, we're talking about radiators today, and we always talk about cars that are overheating and when we have problems from getting too hot. This is the time of year, and we had a couple in the shop last week. The cars are not getting hot enough this time of year. I know in my Toyota, our shop Scion, our temperature light actually lights up in blue until the car gets hot. Then the blue light goes away and there's no light, and it would turn red if there was a light. So if you have a car that you're noticing we see a lot of check engine lights for this too. The car's not getting up to operating temperature fast enough. So if your car is not producing heat within about 3 or 4 minutes, if you have a newer car, say 96 and newer, you might have a problem with a stuck open thermostat, which is going to equal bad gas mileage and no heat and so on and so forth.
Low coolant as well. That's another issue. We've seen issues where people are complaining their heater doesn't get warm, and we find out that their coolant system is, half gallon low on coolant.
True. Yes, not enough to circulate through the core.
Well, one of the things people say is, my car overheated. I never saw the gauge go up. And that happens all the time when you have a big rupture of coolant and it comes pouring out of the system. The temperature sensor in the cooling system has to be in contact with the coolant, otherwise it won't register hot. So when the coolant is gone or you're low on coolant, that gauge is not reading accurately. So low coolant is just not good in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, and then let's just talk about some miscellaneous stuff. 50-50 coolant mixture.
Yes.
You think, okay.
Yes. Coolant needs a water additive to help it do what it's supposed to do, to activate the components of the coolant in the system. So I recommend a 50-50 mix.
Yeah,
and I prefer distilled water over this stuff we call water that comes out of our tap.
Well, yeah, you're my supplier, Terry, and 6-7 years ago we had a couple cars where we're like, gosh, these things are overheating. They really kicked our butt. We're going, it's not the radiator. It's only been in there 2 years. When we had a couple where they were plugged up from the hard water. So now we have a water treatment system that we use only for radiators when we do that. And we do our 60%. We go for more of a 60-40, more being more water, less coolant. It still gets you the great freeze protection, and it's just not quite as strong.
We've actually seen cases, Matt, where people have overheated because they put nothing but straight coolant in the system.
Yeah.
This is a case where more is not necessarily
right,
better.
Exactly. we used it when I worked on the race team and race cars and stuff, is water wetter, a surfactant. And to just, those are more in special applications. You don't need to do that in your everyday ride, if you will. But if you've got a hot rod or one of those ones that just is a little bit hotter for whatever reason, a little bit of water wetter from Redline or some other additives might help that too.
Well, thanks, Terry, for coming in to help us with radiators. If you're looking for an honest, competent auto repair shop, you can find a list of great shops at bumper-to-bumperradio.com. While you're there, be sure to like Matt and myself on Facebook. We're Light On Friends. Hey, we'll see you next week.
There's nothing more important than family. Hi, Kurt Rock for Kurt's Auto Repair. Family owned and operated and bumper-to-bumper radio preferred. We've been taking care of Valley families and their auto care needs with a perfect Better Business record for over 27 years. Come experience the difference our ASE Master Techs can make for you and your family at Kurt's Auto Repair. Just east of I-17 at 22nd Avenue and Bell Road, or online at mycarhurts.com. Gas or diesel, foreign or domestic. If your car hurts, take it to Kurt's.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, a time for decked halls, roasted chestnuts, and jingle bells. You can make a child's holiday magical this Christmas. The Wigwam and Arizona Biltmore Golf Clubs are partnering with Toys for Tots this holiday season to bring joy and Christmas toys to less fortunate children in the community. Bring an unopened toy or make a donation at either the Wigwam Golf Resort or the Arizona Biltmore Golf Club and receive a $10 merchandise credit to use in the pro shops. Help spread the Christmas cheer this year. Visit azbiltmoregc.com or wigwamgolf.com for more information.
Hi, I'm Scott, General Manager with Whitey's Auto Repair here in South Scottsdale. We built a reputation for quality auto service and repair for over 45 years, and our customers have come to trust us for our recommendations. We value that trust, and that's why when it comes to transmissions, for the past several decades, we have been recommending Tri-City Transmission. They have yet to disappoint. I feel so strongly about it, I wouldn't go anywhere else. Why would you? Google them online today at tricitytransmission.com. Go where the pros go. Tri-City Transmission.
Hi, I'm Matt Allen.
And I'm Dave Riccio. We're the Car Guys. We invite you to join us every Saturday morning at 11 right here on News Talk 92.3 KTAR for the Bumper to Bumper radio show.
Bring us your car questions and concerns, and we'll help you find the right answers, products, and partners to solve your problems.
And for the best automotive shops and answers every day, check us out online at bumpertobumperradio.com.
You may drive in anxious.